about AI, digital storytelling, using AI in the classroom, outside of the classroom as well. So today we're going to have a journey into a classroom, which is mine, and also other colleagues' classrooms where we use AI effectively and creatively. So we're going to start a little bit by talking about the approach that I use in my classroom, which is the active learning approach. And of course, let's say the approach is based on PBL, project-based learning. Also, we'll start by why digital storytelling and why I have chosen to talk about this today, and with few strategies, how to tune in storytelling to many age groups. So today we're going to see, let's say, digital storytelling, not only, for earlier classrooms, or maybe middle school learners or adults, but it's going to be inclusive as much as I can. Also, I'm glad and honored to have some of my students' projects with me today as case studies. And I'm really very grateful to their collaboration, creativity, and without them, I wouldn't be the teacher that I am today. And also, we're going to talk more about skills, because everyone, we do have access to AI, we do use it creatively, but we're going to see to what extent it's more of developing skills in this process. And to keep it, let's say, equitable all over the world, I'm also going to talk about a framework which I'm using right now, which is the UNESCO's framework, and how every teacher can tune in his or her lesson to this framework. And also, we're not going to talk only about teachers as well. As I said, there is also a framework for students. So tune in to see how students, they evaluate themselves, the learning process through what we call the learning outcomes for every lesson and every project. And finally, everyone, we cannot really forget to talk about sustainability and how to maintain this over space and time, not only for this generation, but future generations, for, a safer world, and let's say, for all the good aspects to humanity. So I'm going to start with a video, and I apologize really if the sound will not be clear, but I want you, while watching this video, please pay attention to the dynamics of this classroom. And let me know, do you recognize some of these classrooms? Are they the same in your classroom? Yes or no? And let's see it together. I'm sorry for my internet connection. It's a little bit slow, so you will see the video a little bit, maybe loading slowly. So what do you notice about this classroom? So have you ever been in a situation where you are in this classroom and your students, they're just looking at you this way, and you kept on saying, does anyone understand? What is this? Does anyone has the answer to this? And you had this look from students. If yes, please type it in the chat and say yes or no. So I had, in my early beginnings, before, coming across a lot of teacher training, some moments where students, they were just, daydreaming sometimes. But basically, at that time, I had that aha moment that I said. So as a teacher, I do not want to talk that much, but instead I want my students to do it. So I really believe in this quote, in this motto, as my teaching, philosophy in class. So instead of just talking too much, so showing is better, than just telling. Because if you tell, students may forget. But if you teach them really hands-on through projects, involve them, really, they will learn. And myself included, as a learner, I really learned this way. So now, if you have your mobile phone next to you, or you're using your laptop, please go to menti.com, and you can type the code you see on the screen. So together, in one word, how can you describe active learning? So I've been describing active learning the way I know it myself. So I'm interested in knowing, what do colleagues present today with us perceive about active learning? Is it kinesthetic? learning? What is it exactly according to you? So I will pause my, my presentation a little bit to switch to Mentimeter. In the meantime, please, I can see some words really popping in, like fun, active learning. So if it can be one word, what can it be? Involvement, motivation. And sometimes people, they have confusion between active pedagogy and active learning. So today we're going to see the difference between different layers of active learning. It's participation. So let me check maybe the chat. Some colleagues are typing the chat. It's motivation, productive, involvement, authentic. All right. Thank you so much for everyone who really contributed either to Mentimeter or in the chat. Thank you. So let's dive in now about some of the aspects that are really used in my classroom and some of the other practices that I've been inspired to through my students. So if we can summarize maybe active learning in the sense, so this word cloud can really include more of the words. Some of you've typed some of them in the chat, others in Mentimeter. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to start by the first aspect, that I'm using for my active learning lessons. I do believe in the flipped classroom, as I said. So it's good to prepare, a perfect lesson. That is really amazing. You can be proud of this, after your students have met their learning needs by the end of the lesson. But I'm sure that many of you here their classrooms, and we all know, I'm not going to define it here today, what is flipped classroom. But basically, have you noticed if whenever you flip the classroom activity, would you be having like more better results? Students reaching out to you is like with more ideas. Even the rapport and relationship between you and your students, they have a better communication style with you because they do believe that you involve them in the lesson. So since here we're talking about involvement. And to define it, the flipped classroom, it has many ways of really letting students learn their own pace. Once you flip, for instance, you let them really research and search about things, before the classroom. And then once in class, instead of just reading the text, passively and getting a boring lesson. So students, they discuss, they really give feedback to each other. And of course, this is a very, very fulfilling learning environment, and this is thanks to students' feedback that I've received and from all colleagues in their classrooms. So some of the aspect for active learning, and I'm going to tell you why I'm linking active learning to digital storytelling today. So for active learning, the active learning method here, it kind of it's basically improving student problem-solving skills. The emphasis is more on the analytical skills, more than just, memorization and passive information. It's like, the traditional style in the first video that we saw at the beginning of our presentation is like the teacher is like doing a transfer of knowledge, a transfer of skills, asking questions, and making sure they get the right answer. But with the active learning method, there is no right and wrong, let's say, approach, no right and wrong methodology, let's say. As soon as it gets, the results needed. And some of the techniques, as I said, collaboration, partnership, since it's based on projects. So especially if it's not English, for instance, if you teach physics or math, a lot of demonstrations and debates can happen in this process as well. And as a teacher, it's really helps students, achieve the best version of themselves. So talking about active learning, and as I said at the beginning, so active learning might be sometimes confused with active pedagogy, even because I'm based in a French-speaking environment. A lot of my colleagues, they tell me active pedagogy, and they use it interchangeably, for adults and children, which is not the case. So we all know that pedagogy, it has a particular age, age group. In dragogy and pedagogy as well. So as you see from the framework, going up onto the pyramid, we seek more of learner autonomy, maturity. Adult learners, they don't want really to be ushered towards, let's say, the right answer, if so. But instead, the project-based learning is like a simulation for them to real-world scenarios. For instance, I teach engineers. In my English language classroom, they do really simulations of some case studies they might encounter for real once they graduate as future engineers. So it's good as a teacher to go less with the control issues that teachers have and structure the lesson in a way students have more of that autonomy towards level 3, let's say. Next, of course, since we talked about active learning, so I'm going to link all of it later on to digital storytelling in the sense. So it's not like teachers, they just present to students a curriculum, a course, and this is it, and it's imposed. But the learning happens in the sense interchangeably. It's like the teachers, they do really tell students why they're learning this. They ask, and students, they do know this, and they assess the content. And as teachers, we go back to edit accordingly. So it's like not a single loop learning. It's not a one-way road. It's like a highway with a double loop learning approach, which means like we do present info, we actionably plan them, and afterwards we assess the results, and we evaluate and assess accordingly, and we do the cycle once again. So now I've mentioned, digital storytelling, but why do you think people tell stories? Myself included today, through this presentation, I'm telling you a story, which is my story as a teacher implementing digital storytelling in the classroom. But as you can see from the photos in here, so many of us, sometimes we do need to tell a story, sometimes for social purposes, maybe for psychological reasons, for the need to identify with a particular group sometimes for entertainment, once you gather with family, friends, even students themselves, so they do tell stories, and everyone has a story to tell. And it has evolved over time, as you see from, the campfire circle that, sometimes it's like the oldest person in the tribe telling the story, until nowadays what we have with AI. And today, we're diving into the digital aspect of this. So what makes storytelling digital in this sense? Is it the tools? Like, are they only for the tools that we use, that we just call this digital storytelling? And so these are all questions. Please feel free to answer them in the chat. So do you think now students, they do really like storytelling, digital storytelling? And if so, what kind of approach as a teacher you can really follow to meet the learning outcomes of the lesson and, let's say, the course overall? So I'm going to start by sharing, first of all, some of the examples. And then through those examples, I'm flipping the presentation itself. We'll dive into the frameworks later on. And feel free, please, in the meantime, to type your insights in the chat. So I'm going to start with some of the, let's say, approaches, some of the, let's say, projects that I worked with digital storytelling. It was through, going back, referring back to previous stories that students already know, and then rely on their mental agility to imagine a different version of the story. For instance, what do you think can be the story of this photo? Or who do you think it can be? Let's check in the chat. Mary Poppins, yes. So it all started with this photo. And, starting from this photo, we started reimagining stories. From Mary Poppins to Alice in Wonderland to The Old Man in the Sea to Kalila and Dimna, and adding some characters to Kalila and Dimna, to those who know the fables of Kalila and Dimna, to the race of rabbit and the turtle. And here we imagine a different version of the turtle, And, all of this happens. First of all, this was intuitive, all of it. But then as a teacher, I came across, the framework that I'm sharing with you today, which has been developed by the UNESCO's as a guide for generative AI in education research. I started to tune in and refine all the content based on their recommendations to applying PBL in active learning, and especially for digital storytelling. So for instance, in this sense, I'm not going to read all of that, but I'm just, basically rely on the advantages and the challenges of this. Sometimes students, they can prompt ChatGPT or any photo generator to generate a photo like this. Other times, as a teacher, you can guide them from the beginning to develop their own process. It's like they discover, for instance, your approach, your model provided to them. They implement it, they reflect on this, or then they create their own model. Other times you let your students really experiment with this. And by letting the chatbot be like a coach to them. And by a coach, I mean not really copy and pasting the content and delivering it to the teacher. That's not the purpose. Actually, to avoid this happening, so every lesson can be based on Bloom's taxonomy with AI in the sense, you steer the background knowledge that students know, for instance, about fairy tales. You contextualize and tell them why we're doing this approach. For instance, to elaborate a story with a different end, and why is this? To kind of encourage more of that creativity and imagination for them. Then you apply effectively the process. You let them work in groups, analyze. Especially in my case, I had software engineering students. They created their own chatbots. So they fine-tuned, even through machine learning, the chatbot, prompt itself. They evaluate it, and finally, they can share results with you in class as a teacher. Another tool that can be basically, very useful, and this tool has been evolving. Now we have version 7, V7, of what we call the pedagogy wheel. It's not it's pedagogy wheel. And as you notice the pedagogy wheel, if you see in the circle, in the middle, there's the Bloom's taxonomy verbs. And as it goes wider, you can see some of the applications and apps that can be useful to you as a teacher and students. First of all, as a teacher, you can plan your lesson and fine-tune all those activities with those apps. For instance, if you need your students to remember, use those, some of the apps in the green area. If you want your students to really apply, some skills in the lesson, use some of the pink ones available in the pink area. And of course, this is a tool which is available for free. You can really explore it. It's very useful. I always keep my pedagogy wheel next to me when I plan my lessons. It makes things easier. And you can even add some of the apps, because phone apps are really proliferating today, and we have more than one app and that is being released nowadays in the market. And in here, a big hello to Eduling for her app, for my friend and colleague. So with digital storytelling, also, the cultural aspect is important, because especially if you're teaching students at a multicultural environment, and more than this, we're global citizens. So the cultural aspect is always present. For instance, some of the activities that can be done is like If you're teaching students, some cultural aspects, you can ask your students to really imagine some of the ancient civilizations in the past using ChatGPT or any, photo generator. We have so plenty of them, like ideogram, like Copilot. So just such, but not limits to only one chatbot, let's say. And here, for instance, if you can guess who is the person, if you type it, please, in the chat, I will be very, very happy. So I'll give you, a few seconds to try to guess maybe. The first one is obvious, it's Egypt, pyramids. But this one is really relatable to my culture and Dido and the history of Carthage. So because I'm based and I'm born and raised, I'm a Tunisian. So I've also implemented, this in my classrooms. So students, how can you really think of Carthage, ancient times, and maybe how you see Egypt or any other ancient culture in the future? So this is really to use their imagination, let the students, experiment. Feel free really to give them that freedom to explore that through AI. And basically, all of this happens now what we call like a storyboard. So we're going to explore a little bit one of my students' projects. They called it time traveling. And they created a story through a carousel, let's say, in a storyboard format. And they called it time traveling. So they started the story through the forbidden mistake that all know it, that Adam Eve. And, they started, with the hook. And Adam really confused about time and space and came across a time machine. What do you think can happen next? So this is a question that students ask themselves. So I presented this project. Well, what do you think, please, in the chat, could have happened after Adam came across this tool? Is he going to travel to Egypt, Tunis? Where exactly? So the students, they really dive deep into the history of Tunisia over the past and all the colonization for us happening and how the country's culture has evolved ever since through until independence and the revolution nowadays. So it was an amazing project. And some of their learning outcomes for them is like reimagining a future version of Tunis, and getting more into working with each other was another takeaway they talked about. So some of other activities from my students, creating games. They create online games as well. So another student shared this work with me about creating some of the characters. He uses his video games as well, and he creates what we call a storyboard to the video game. So I'm just going to scroll step by step. So you're free to maybe explore this if you want. My students' work is available online, and this student, is keen on using elements like nature, fire, air. So, and as coders themselves, they do really create these characters in games. Also, as teachers, we can talk about digital storytelling. And this is another story that I've used in one of the teacher training sessions, creating fun stories about teachers ourselves, And it was about a teacher who always came to school, arrived to school very, very late. In the Chronicles of Miss Tardy, she was always late to class. So talking about digital storytelling goes from just photos to AI videos as well. So some of my students, they have animated. So I'm just going to mute a little bit to avoid having, a voice dissonance. So they have animated those photos, and they had recorded themselves, narrating the story that I have created through the script. And here you can notice like some of the aspects, with AI, even when they animate this, it doesn't really look like, a real human being. And that was according to their feedback as well. So we're not going to watch the whole video, but students, they had fun working on this project. and, especially editing the project itself. So moving on to the next slide. So the procedure is as much important as the content. So it all starts with prompting, generating, animating here for videos, narrating this, editing, because students, they're very, very, demanding themselves when before they submit their projects, they make sure they edit, they ask for feedback, what can I add? They ask each other. Finally, they share the final product. And then, so we were so proud of this, final. It was last year's project, and we watched them all together. Some of the websites that I recommend, and as usual, this is not limited only to those websites. There are plenty of them. This is, for different age groups, as I mentioned. So this is maybe for early childhood. So Lego is providing as well what we call story starters. Canva is providing as well an AI story generator. Of course, you can provide as a teacher, a template to your students from a sample story that they can write. For instance, creating photos and writing a short caption to each photo. And if it's a video, they can write even the duration and they animate this. This is, let's say, a blank template that you can provide to your students where exactly they have to add the different sections. Also, digital storytelling included not only, as I said, photos, videos, but also podcasts. And since I'm presenting at Educast, so I'm also inspired by what my colleague is doing with Educast. I'm not sure if everyone knows my experience with the Kaizen experience and Ikigai. I've used AI myself last year, and I had a conversation, and recorded this. It was the beginning. And later on, we went into applying this in the classroom. I hope the video will be displayed in here. So you can watch, of course, this is shared. Sorry, excuse me. This is shared with the approval of my students, where we conducted, this activity, and they prompted ChatGPT, and recorded this. So, and it all started like this, but it evolved afterwards, into a podcast that they shared on Spotify, talking about their interests, talking about their hobbies, talking about AI itself and their academic life. Finally, students, they have evaluated their learning outcomes themselves. By the end of the course, students, they were encouraged into, kind of extracting those learning outcomes and key learning outcomes. What did they learn from this? Why they're doing the digital storytelling project? Some of the websites that they have used and adopted. So I'm just going to scroll a little bit because, I need to really focus a little bit on the AI framework and the competencies. So also my students, they really, I modeled an example for them so that a project should be conducted in a sense, we do use AI, but we should be very careful of copyright and respecting other people's intellectual property. So they have created and labeled and licensed their own projects with Creative Commons. And also they created their own e-magazine. Also, they created their own Discord server where they have presented and listened. So this is to exchange, and improve some of the listening skills and speaking skills. So they took turns listening to the podcast and sharing feedback in a Discord server. And we do know that, students nowadays, they do like Discord so much. And they talked about sustainability in not just like goals or labels, but they do really apply it hands-on. If we talk, for instance, about creating a sustainable environment, for them, Discord, for instance, was a sustainable environment. It's a safe environment where they can ask questions. For instance, even for homework, asking questions about guidance, listening to other podcasts and getting to know how should they do their homework, for instance. Also, they've written haiku poems. So I'm sharing a little bit some of the work that my students did. So this is going to be a little bit quick. So this is the e-magazine. They're really critically applied the SDGs, as I said, and I've written some of the articles. I'm sharing my student Sarah's article. Also implementing, this hands-on. So here coming to an important aspect about students, assessing their learning outcomes. So this is what I called intended learning outcomes, which is ILOs. So as a teacher, I created myself like a matrix. And this is handed also to students. So they had to tick, for instance, according to the lessons learning outcomes, which assignment really ticked a box in that learning outcome. And this was very insightful to them. It's like they're not just learning something, but they're, coached to think about the learning process, learning to learn. It's very important nowadays. And as I said, we're more into developing skills in the sense we deal with human beings, and myself included. I rely a lot on their mental agility. I'm happy to find out that if I have students, having that open mindset to experiment, and if they're keen on using technology, I ask them sometimes to model by flipping the activity in class, a demonstration, for instance, how to create a video game. So they really like this so much, and they do it wholeheartedly. Talking about STEM education, and I moved on from just STEM to STEAM by including arts. For our STEAM, it stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics. I've also collaborated with many colleagues really through interdisciplinary projects in which English was part of them. And all of us, we're implementing something called here in the sense, the AI competency framework for students and for teachers. So now I'm going to talk about this, and this is really very important because using AI without restrictions can be scary sometimes and risky. It's like we should use it, but we should take consideration of many aspects. The human aspect, the ethical aspect should be there. And of course, respecting the human intelligence and the many intelligences, we're going to see as many as they are for students. So we really should be thinking that instead of just having a kind of, imposing, knowledge on students, having a communicative, approach with them, discussing things, how can I, for instance, change this activity into a better one for next time? And this is through feedback. It's really very important. So as you notice that this framework recalls some of Bloom's taxonomies as well, like to understand, apply, and create. So in this sense, we can use this framework, together with Bloom's taxonomy, and they intertwine in many aspects. And of course, this is the benefit to all students and teachers, equally. So also for teachers, as I've mentioned, and maybe my colleagues, in previous presentations, they did talk about professional development and how important it is for teachers. Things evolve, and so should we. We do evolve through the support of, the community, through the support of whatever is being available to us. For instance, like these frameworks nowadays, they're really helpful. It's just instead of just really, doing things intuitively, it's, high time that things get organized in the sense we harmonize this, so that we get approximately same outcomes for students. So talking about, some of the AI competencies, And some of you, of course, might know NLP in the sense neuro-linguistic programming, but also AI and NLP exists in a natural language processing as well. So how prompt engineering happens in the sense when we type a sentence into the chatbot, you know, the chatbot is programmed in the sense through machine learning how to operate, how to analyze that info according to the data which has been inserted into that chatbot, you know, and so that the chatbot is trained in the sense it generates a particular result. So this happens through what we call NLP, natural language processing, which is very similar to our natural language as humans. But we do all know that the language that AI reproduces is far away from being a natural language to us. So the core functions as well of NLP is like it's based on integrating computational linguistic aspects. But it's also very different from our NLP, the one we do know use it as human beings. So talking about this language, the natural language processing, we cannot also forget to talk about LLMs, which are the large language models infused into AI. But what's an LLM? An LLM is a type of artificial intelligence that understands and generates a human-like text by processing what is already been there, you know, as data inserted. So, for instance, some of the assignments that I conducted with students relying on LLMs is that I flip the activity. I generate a text, you know, from AI, and I ask students to humanize it. They identify what are the aspects, you know, that are existing in that text, which are, you know, once you read them, you know that it's ChatGPT or any chatbot. And instead of that, they had to rewrite the story using their own language, and then they imagine an alternative ending, for instance, to the story. They can add more characters, or even they describe characters using some of the vocabulary that they can generate from the chatbot. This is a sample, you know, activity that I conducted with students. They liked it so much because most of the time, you know, students, what they do generate the text, they humanize it, they send it to teachers. Now, we do know this, so let's flip this. So here is a text by AI. How can we humanize this? So that was fun, you know, and students, they were not expecting this, but they enjoyed it. And the final results were shared in the projects that we saw previously. So talking about machine learning, talking about AI, of course, I'm just going to wrap up. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, I just want to remind.
Thank you. So future trends, last slide. The future trends of digital storytelling. We cannot really forget about, you know, we talked about AI, we talked about videos, magazines. Now we have VR. So VR, there are virtual worlds, you know, and some of these apps, you know, we can, as teachers, explore many aspects through VR. And of course, this is just the beginning. And finally, we make our students, you know, basically aware of many aspects while using AI, which is respecting each other, fairness while using information, respecting, you know, privacy of anything available online, and you know, ethically address this. So thank you so much. So I'm just going to, you know, to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm sorry if I went beyond my time limit. And this is just the end of my presentation. Thanks to everybody who's been following us. Thanks to my students. Thanks to colleagues. Thanks to Educast. And I'm sorry, Ling.
No problem. Actually, you're right on time. We just want to have some time for questions because the audience actually put a lot of comments in the chat and some have questions. And I also have questions for you. Great presentation. So many interesting ideas. I like how you led us through active learning to project-based learning. And in this case, you showed us a lot of storytelling projects. And, I'm a big fan of concepts like active learning or engagement, project-based learning, task-based learning. So I want to ask you this one first question. How can AI-powered digital storytelling enhance student engagement and language fluency?
A lot, a lot. So according to my experience and to other colleagues, students, even Ling, when they really they're shy, they don't want to really to participate in class. So once you involve them with with storytelling, basically, not only digital, sometimes with basic storytelling, everyone has a story to tell. And when it comes to language fluency and language learning, it gets them, more well at ease because using AI, for instance, as an AI speaking assistant, they can learn new vocab. They don't feel, if they feel shy with a normal human being, they know that AI is not going to judge them in a sense. But basically, they should learn that not all information conveyed by AI should be trustworthy. So they learn to evaluate this in the process as well.
Yes, absolutely. You already showed us some examples of what students have improved by through those projects. So I also like those examples of projects because project-based learning is also related to task-based learning, right? A project is a long-term project with a lot of tasks. So what I can see is that students learn a lot, but they also need a lot of guidance. And so my next question is that what are the key challenges that students face while integrating AI into active learning and into their projects?
Some of the challenges, as I mentioned, thanks for the question. And some of the challenges is that some students, they're keen on using AI themselves, thinking that we teachers are going to teach them something, is outdated. So I've noticed that students, they're very motivated. They even suggest other examples. Miss, look, there is another website they can do this, with a better quality, whatever. So it's like students, they never stop really surprising me with good examples. It's like sometimes we do have challenges as teachers, but it's lifelong learning, continuous.
Yes, definitely. Students have their own creativity, but sometimes as teachers, I feel like I still have to walk them through a process in terms of giving them feedback. So there's still a lot of scaffolding in that process of teaching students to complete a project. I also love your ideas of having students self-assess, right, their learning outcomes. So that's really great. I think I see a question from the audience that I would like to ask here. At what age do you think students should be using the generative AI tools?
I think safeguarding is really important. So if, underage students, they're using AI, I really believe that they should be doing this. For instance, if it's at home with parents, if it's with their teachers, there are many websites and platforms, Ling, that they do have like filters. Like we can use, for instance, video generators that won't generate some obscene words or something for students, but it should be used with caution for young learners. Saying that there's an age, I do believe that for anyone using the internet, there should be, adults, basically. And if they're using it, let's say below the required age, I think someone else should be there, an older, mature person with guidance, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the US, the age of digital consent is 13 in most states, but I know in Europe it's 16. So parental consent and guidance is very important here as well. So let me see if there are more. Another thing I want to comment is that as I listened to your presentation, I can see the usefulness of storytelling activities. And in the age of AI, I see a lot of AI generated images there. So what seems to be appealing to me is all these beautiful images, and sometimes they are really different and they are really novel. And novelty usually encourages engagement. So that's kind of really interesting in terms of using AI to generate novelty and engagement. But for teachers who want to implement storytelling in a non-digital way, I do think that it's possible, right? Pen and paper and asking students to draw pictures and all those kind of things. What's your thoughts on that? What are the alternatives to all the AI generated images?
I'll tell you, myself included, I like drawing and painting so much. So I remember one of the workshops I conducted with therapeutic art coaching. It's like participants, they have to draw really with pencils, and they have to color their own photos, their own, artwork. And so I do encourage really reusing authenticity because AI is there. It remodels and kind of regenerates already existing artwork. And this is why we should talk about copywriting as well. For instance, I've used some of Van Gogh's, artwork in some of the Alice in Wonderland and maybe the Old Man in the Sea. It's good, but it's really scary in the sense people can use it in a different sense. Who can really protect, those artists, copyright and rights to kind of distribute this without their approval. So in the sense, I do encourage creating something authentic for you, as I said. Painting, drawing, even, something simplistic. It doesn't have to be perfect. They can use AI as a coach, and it's mentioned in one of the framework is like the chatbot can be used as an art coach to someone. For instance, they can take a photo of the let's say the artwork itself and ask AI, how can I make it in this sense? So what should I add as elements? So this is how AI can be used in a healthy, let's say, way.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Sometimes I have my students draw, right? If I want them to tell a story about something that happened to them in the past, I ask them to draw pictures. I ask them to cut up the pictures and then turn it into a task. So although I'm a technology developer, also some of these activities can be really beneficial.